thank you for those who are attending, and we also would like to thank those who are behind their computers. This is a special moment. I'm really happy to be here. It's also intimidating. It's not something which is natural for me. Hopefully, you can bear with me. I'm very happy. Today, les Grands Jours de Bourgogne. Well, we have a 2022 edition. We are halfway in this program, and certainly we were afraid we had to cancel the one in 2020, and we suffered, due to this, the fact of welcoming you and showing you our latest vintages is something very important for us in the wine growing business. And definitely, we were really eager to be back with you in person. And during these 3 days, I've been traveling around between Chablis, la Côte de Nuit, and today the Mâconnais region and the other Burgundy. Certainly, I'm so happy to see happy, brimming faces, happy during the discussions and do some tasting. So it's really great to see this. I rejoice at this. Without disclosing the figures, there's a first target, which is sharing pleasure together. These are moments which are always very important, and we know that we try to show that, to express it consistently. Given the context, which was quite tough, to say the least, we were able to make sure that we kept alive our usual format with about 10 tastings between the Chablis region on Monday, all the way to Friday on the Côte de Bourgogne, and today it was the Mâconnais, tomorrow the Côte Chalonnaise. We are, and you were, 2,100 registered visitors. We'll see at the end of the week what is the final count. So we are quite happy because in 2018, there were about 2,300 people who had signed up. And so the level of the numbers this year was sending a good, encouraging message, despite the health situation and the events not far from us. Well, you felt like coming and visiting us. This is great for us. It's a lot of encouraging stuff. So we are about half between the professionals coming from France and those who are coming from abroad, with about 55 different nationalities. Usually we are between 55 and 60, so the goal was achieved, and it's great. In other words, we have nearly the whole planet who is meeting with us here in the Bourgogne region. Having said that, with respect to producers and winemakers, the estates, there are fewer people compared to 2018. There are about 950 companies this year. And in 2018, we were 1,050. So the situation with the 2020 and 2021 vintages being what they are, some companies didn't wish to be here. Having said this, you have a wide diversity of the winemakers and the wine merchants who can show you the vintages, the latest ones. A few figures now, and I'll stop there. In Chablis, we had about 710 visitors. Usually it's 730, so it's quite at the target. No, at Le Clos Vougeot, over 700 people yesterday, and in the two events of Gevrey, Chambertin, and Quatier, and there were about 1,100 visitors. As of today, here at the convention hall, there are 900 people who have visited already. So these are excellent figures, which make us happy about the number of visitors and the quality of our visits. Now, for this particular event, certainly we have drawn the lessons of the ups and downs we've seen, I mean, the different events. So 2022 compared to 2018, well, there's a difference, a large number. I mean, some people are complaining of not getting documents to be able to jot things down. Now it's more digital, and we've moved to the digital more. We had to do that. It was heartbreaking at the board of the wine to have to kick out all the documents that had been prepared in 2020 due to the fact, how can I state it, that we pushed back our events. All these documents were ready, and we decided in 2022 to digitalize everything. So this is a change, for sure. Some people are not yet accustomed to this. So we fully take responsibility for this. You were able also to see in the name tags, the badges, we try to simplify things so that you can come in more easily, so that it's smoother, so it's easy to go in here. So these are the novelties. So when you go to the website, you can find the whole list of the wine merchants and the wine growers. So much for our event this year, 2022, and today we are quite happy. This event is important for the whole wine business. I am the spokesperson for this, but behind me there's a whole team which is here of elected councillors or people from the Burgundy Wine Board and who help us materially. In addition, we have partners. The main partner is the Burgundy Wine Board, the BIVB, who supports us, but also the Bourgogne Regional Council and the three departmental, the Côte d'Or, Saône-et-Loire, and the Yonne, who are supporting us, and the Crédit Mutuel, the bank, Crédit Mutuel, which is providing also help. So event by event, we have partners that help so that all of this runs smoothly. At any rate, if there are questions later, we will be able to answer them and come back to all of this. Let me now turn it over to Laurent, who will detail the economic situation of our Bourgogne wines. Any questions at this stage, by the way? Regarding the event per se? Apparently no, so thank you very much. Over to you, sir. Thank you, Raphaël. Hello, everyone. So I will now present the weather conditions. First of all, with the weather conditions for the next few days, following the landmark frost last year, Burgundy is looking at the weather conditions. The 4 or 5, 6 weeks will be critical, but fortunately, thanks to a fairly cold winter, this year is coming later. So bud bursts shouldn't come before at least 2 weeks. So this is a bit reassuring regarding the long-term weather conditions. The climate change is of concern to us. We are on the first front to see the consequences on our daily work, and we are acting, we're mustering up to check our carbon emissions, as we were able to do at the press conference, which was held, Wine Expo in Paris. What I want to underline today, chiefly in a metaphorical way, is the market weather conditions for the next 18 months in particular. We are all happy to see the beautiful weather. There's sunshine. The morale seems to be high. The economic situation as well. Everything seems fine. Having said that, we are starting to see some mist, and we don't have much visibility yet. It is possible that some clouds start to pile up. If I translate this into the figures, Burgundy, or La Bourgogne, has just had a 2021 year that has been phenomenal, with records. We'll come back to them in a little while. On the other hand, with respect to 2022, this is where the lack of visibility can be felt. This is where the clouds are starting to appear, and we have a hard time telling you exactly, making forecasts for 2022. First of all, the reasons behind the situation. A very low 2021 harvest. In Burgundy, we had less than 1 million hectoliters. That's 2/3 of our normal harvest or crop. Despite that, these changes in the last few years, we are remaining on an average over 5, 10, or 15 years of about 1,450,000 hectoliters. And last year was 1 million euros. It's the Crémant of Burgundy that hurt the most, with minus 43%, then the whites, and then the reds. Minus 39% for the whites, and for the red ones, minus 29% in terms of production. Fortunately for the whites and the Crémant de Bourgogne, we have some reserves. The VCI, which allows to erase slightly such changes. We are used to analyze the market in two sections at the Burgundy board, wine board. First of all, the upstream. We call this is transactions between the wine growers and the merchants, and then the market, the real market, that is the one where you sell to those who import, to the distributors, to consumers, etc. What we see, first of all, in the upstream market, and it doesn't come as a surprise, is fewer transactions the first 6 months from August to the end of January, minus 34% compared to last year. Well, last year, it was a very special year. But if we refer to the average of the 5 last year, it's minus 24%, the decline. What we notice also in parallel to this is, again, a rise in the releases, wine releases from the estates. That is the sales onto the market, because we are still at plus 6% in terms of volumes in the first 6 months. The sales of Burgundy increased again by 6%. So definitely we see a drop in supplies of harvest, a rise in the markets, and we see immediately how difficult it means now. Inventory and stocks are nearly at their lowest. Transactions between the wine growers and the wine merchants, it's 87% on the 2021 vintage. It shows that there are none of the 2020 to be sold, so it's a very small, very small vintage, and 43% of the harvest has already been exchanged between the wine growers and the wine merchants. Now, let's come back to 2021 with a vintage of all records. Let me start with France first. Well, France, we can divide it between traditional markets, such as restaurants, specialist wine stores, or direct sales at the estates. On average, it's about 55% of the French sales of the Bourgogne wines. We don't have specific figures because there's no range to track the traditional wine, especially restaurants, but we know from the field that has kicking up again. It is rebounding, and it's brisk again. However, the big retailers, which represent about 45% in France usually, well, we are in our record year, 318 million euros in revenues, a rise of 4.3% in volumes, 8.2% rise in values. Don't forget and we'll talk about it. What's going on in Bourgogne now, this is the rises in values are bigger than the volume rises, and Burgundy is one of the few French regions that is pulling it off so well with the large retailers. The supermarkets, the overall supermarkets are down minus 2.3% across all the markets, across all the AOC wine, and we are in positive. It's one of the few French vineyards that is pulling it off better with Alsace and our Beaujolais friends. But we are absolutely the most dynamic for the French supermarkets and hypermarkets. It's the whites now, essentially, that are driving this growth, and the Cremant of Burgundy that have even larger volumes, plus 9% in volume, plus 10% in revenues after 2020 that had been difficult for all the sparkling wines. We knew that it was not a year where we wanted to open a sparkling Cremant wine to celebrate anything. Now, exports, it's our absolute record year, 1,322,000,000 of euros in revenues, which represents 12% of all the French wine exports, whilst Burgundy represents 4.5% of the French wine. So we are outperforming in the export markets, 105 million of bottles sold after a year, 2020, that was fairly stable, which is noteworthy. We had not lost, we had stayed fairly stable, I would say. What is driving exports are the whites, essentially. The regional appellation is the whites that make the biggest volume rise, the Regional de Chablis and the Mâconnais as well. Now, the reds, on the other hand, are those that are in value more, are rising more in value. Now, the Crémant as well have performed extremely well in 2021, the most beautiful year for the past 10 years for the Crémant. In terms of regions now, if we divide the world into three sections, it's the Eurozone, which is where we have most of our volumes and of our revenues, about 35% of volumes and 26% of revenues. The biggest rise in value is North America, especially United States, and the sharpest rise in volume in 2021 is Asia. So how can we explain this enthusiasm, whether in France or in the export countries? There are four main reasons. The first one is we are back with the trend in the last 20 years now. For the last 20 years, the revenues has been rising in Burgundy in a steady way. We had that stagnation, that stalling due to the health situation 2020, and we are back on track with the trend. We are actually speeding up our rise because there's a bounce back effect after the COVID. Our importers, our clients who had been deprived for a while, wanted to catch up a little bit. Secondly, with the same kind of idea, the restart everywhere following the pandemic, the exiting of the pandemic, but at least the end of lockdowns, the reopening of restaurants is helping us. And the third reason, the stopping of the Trump taxes, those taxes that had been imposed as part of the conflict Airbus-Boeing by the American administration, the U.S. Again, our first market taxes stopped in last March, so there's a major recovery in the U.S. market. And the last reason, probably already anticipating a shortage of coming wines, which we felt in the second part of the year, given the small 2021 vintage. Focusing now on the main markets. The exporting one, the United States, are again the first market of our wines. They had lost this ranking last year due to the Trump taxes, as we call this, plus 30% in volume, plus 45% in value, which is phenomenal. The Crémant de Bourgogne and the reds are the category that increase the most in the U.S. The United Kingdom remains, or is again, our second market. It Last year, the year before, it was ranked first, despite the Brexit. So this is the good year of last year. We did not know how the market would react to the Brexit, and finally 2021 turned out to be an excellent year for those who are exporting to the UK. Of course, it's becoming a bit tougher now administratively in terms of customs, documents, etc., to export to the US, but we're used to doing it in the rest of the world, so it's not much more complicated to go to the US than going outside of Europe. We are used to this, so we are absolutely delighted that our British neighbors continue to be big Burgundy lovers. What is interesting is that we see an increase in the red wines in the UK, whilst traditionally the UK was more focusing on whites, which is important for the Macron Village and the Chablis wines. Canada, an interesting phenomenon. The Burgundy wines are the first French AOC wines in the Canadian market with a market share of 25%, which tops by a long shot the production of Burgundy. Burgundy is 4.5% of the French vineyards and 25% of market shares in Canada. So the positioning there is as a leader. The whites, for example, are leaders among the French wines in the Canadian market. And it is these white wines that have particularly risen in the Canadian market in 2021. Now, the Crémant is up, running up again in that market. Now, our fourth market, third in value, is Japan. Japan had slowed down with the pandemic, but despite that, came up with plus 10% in volume, plus 8% in value. I'm giving you figures. Look, you will find them all in your kit, in your dossier, which is quite comprehensive. And it is the sharpest rise in revenues in Japan in the past 15 years, 1.5. And to end this focus on countries, China and Hong Kong, a very sharp rise last year, following a period of a lot of standstill. Following the pandemic in 2021, they are running ahead again. And quite surprisingly, it is the whites that have made the biggest progress in China and in Hong Kong, which are traditionally focusing on reds. What is very interesting is that we're seeing in many markets where we have a strong position, we see a rebalancing. The red traditional ones are moving more towards the whites, and vice versa. It's a Burgundy brand and image which is pulling the whole thing ahead. Now, a few words about the conflict in Ukraine. Obviously, we are quite shocked and moved by what is going on in Ukraine. We all feel a lot of solidarity with the Ukrainians. There are so many initiatives that are adopted individually a bit everywhere in Bourgogne. Look, we're also moved by what's going on for our Russian clients and importers. Russia had increased a lot. I'll give you the figures in the past 10 years with regard to the Burgundy wine sales. And wine, as you know, is about contacts, about sharing, about friendliness. We cannot sell wine without getting intimate or close to our clients. So we are all moved by what is going on to our Ukrainian friends, but also we have some thoughts for our Russian friends who have now, figures-wise, Russia plus Ukraine, that's about 1% of the exports. So 0.9% for Russia and 0.1% for the Ukraine, the latter being a very tiny market. So no direct significant economic consequences as regards the sales and releases. However, we were fairly worried about the indirect impacts. For example, we had in mind the impact on the purchasing power in countries such as Germany, where they depend a lot on the Russian gas, and German consumers will be affected by the situation in the Ukraine. But what we see emerging in the last few days is not exactly that. We have significant alerts regarding commodities, raw materials, and energy, with consequences that are more significant than what we could expect, because what we call our dry commodities, our bottles, our packages, our labels, are rising significantly, extremely, by about 15 to 40%, depending the kind of material is involved. Energy also, with sharp rises which will hit our transport. The containers, when you export to Asia or to America, it will create overprices for our consumers. So finally, this is where we have our concerns. Look, there's been a trend that is bullish or rising for the past 20 years. We have 2021 sort of smaller vintage that accelerates this rise for the next 10 months. Added to this significant rise in energy and so-called dry commodities or raw materials. So we have some doubts about the prices that will be coming along. We cannot hide the fact that prices will be high for our consumers. The good piece of news is that La Bourgogne is the region in the world that has the largest range of appellation, with the largest diversity, with 84 Burgundy appellation. When we start at minus 10 euros with the regional appellation up to big vintages, which are extremely expensive. Look, even though volumes are lower, each consumer can find a Burgundy bottle at the cost they can afford. For example, in the past 10 years, you have much better quality, especially of the appellation régionale, the lower entry levels. So our consumers should not be worried. They will be able to find excellent Burgundy bottles corresponding to their budgets, despite the situation, which gives us very little visibility. So much for the figures, the statistics. Any questions at this stage? Yuki Yamada, Japan. Question regarding Ukraine war. You were speaking about price hikes. Do you think that price hike will represent 15 to 40%? Like we cannot tell you exactly what individually what the prices will have in terms of an impact. It's more important on an appellation régionale with a low price, and it's less significant. It's nearly on a premier cru, on a grand cru, it doesn't hurt really much. What I'm saying is that it's being added to the overall trend of price rises and to this increase, which mechanically is due to the supply and demand and the small 2021 harvest. I don't have a question, but a piece of information for our friends, journalists. You can ask questions through the chat, and they are sent to us directly onto a screen, and then I ask them to the speakers. So don't hesitate. If behind your computer you have any questions, raise them, and we'll give you an answer. Laurent Delaunay, journalist. Your explanation about rebalancing of the reds and whites in the various markets, could you elaborate on that? It's my personal explanation. My feeling is that the markets I mentioned are markets, well, if you take the UK, our whites had reached a market share that was difficult to top. If you take Asia and China, to essentially the reds. And now with the strength of Burgundy or La Bourgogne, we end up attracting our consumers onto products that were a bit lagging behind or overlooked. Well, if there are no additional questions, let's move. Oh, yeah, sir, go ahead. There's a question from... What about the figures for the Quebec region in Canada? And so I don't have the figures for Quebec, the Quebec region in Canada. Let's find out if we have those figures. We can supply them to you. They do exist. Now, on the Canadian figures, the question was, could we have better details about Quebec versus the rest of Canada? 85% in Quebec. Philippe Lonchepierre is in charge of the export. Over to François now. Yes. The communication committee of the Burgundy Wine Board has, from 2015, wanted to underline the appellation régionale, which is the base of our appellation, represents about 50%, 50, of our production in Bourgogne. So, in this case, these are geographic appellations. There are 13 of them from the north to the south. Notice that we are more haute high than Côte coast, haute côte. This video is quite appetizing, and tourism for us is absolutely essential. We know that with the creation of the 3 sites near Joigny, we have Chablis facility. Maybe you visited that facility, and there's a Benoît and the Mâconnais facility or sites. The aim of this video is mainly for French people, but also for French-speaking. We have many cousins, such as Canadians, who visit us. These moments will be broadcast on social networks in a steady way, and we want to unfold them from the north to the south. It will end with the Bourgogne Côte Chalonnaise. It's very important for us to be specific and whet the appetite of our visitors and make sure they are interested in these specialties, in these uniqueness, in these idiosyncrasies. You know that Burgundy is difficult to understand with its appellation, climat, climates, the word terroir or soil. It's just to show you the overall upgrading of the Bourgogne appellation, as you know, the latest newborn one. After 20 years of preparation, is the Bourgogne Côte d'Or, which was baptized, if I may say, in 2017. With regard to the Burgundy Wine Board actions, note that we are present at the Cité internationale de la gastronomie et du vin in the city of Dijon with our school, the wine school, and right from the first day on the 6th of May, which will open officially that Cité de Dijon. We will prepare this to make sure that we can really attract our visitors. We will have specific topics. I mean, some paying workshops with tastings of 4 or 5 wines. So, and also we will make sure people understand the vintage and the production venue of that wine, and also we will make sure that we have a good combination of dishes and wines. We professionals wanted to really be present in the Cité de la Gastronomie in Dijon through the wine school, Ecole des Vins. More specifically, it will be within the the Chablis in Beaune and Mâcon that we will really delve into things. So this Cité, it's about a city in 3 different locations. So there's some smoothness among these 3 different facilities or sites. And the 3 projects are moving forward at a good pace. We are not running behind. The opening is still scheduled in 1 year's time, in the second half of March 2023. And in Beaune, we will open officially this at the end of the year during the wine sale. It's an ambitious project for Burgundy. It's a touristic and cultural project with a flagship in Beaune and the north and the south, the Chablis and Mâcon, where we want to present in a comprehensive way Burgundy in Mâcon and Chablis. At the same time, we want to highlight these 2 other sites apart from Beaune and the more specific nature of the Mâconnais and the Chablis region. Today, we are focusing fully on music. It is moving forward well with excellent creative designers. What we want is really to be able to present Burgundy as a model of models in terms of the terroir wines. We believe that we are the most completed model in terms of terroir wines. It's in Burgundy with a complex biology, with the work of wine growers over a very long term, with very different people sometimes. Imagine a monk 800 years ago, or a family with MPs, or today's wine growers, or during the Roman times 1500 years ago. So very different populations who were interested in the same magic of Burgundy with its different layers, which we find everywhere in Burgundy. Even the faults, the geographical faults. So truly speaking, there's something very strong we want to explain and tell around this model of terroir wines, and we feel that we are, and let me mention this again, we are the architect, the best model of these so-called terroir-specific oil wines. We try to have something contemporary, very respectful of what we are, with a lot of smoothness. We start with geology and going through how wine growers move along, and also especially we will do some specific editing around the notion of climate or weather, which is really absolutely essential for our terroirs. And remember, the Climat in 2015 received a special award by the UNESCO. So it's an ambitious project for our region. It's also a political project because we want to show our wine region, and it's a project which should be also a place to live in. This is why the Ecole des Vins, the wine school, will be hosted in Beaune, just behind us, and will help us also fulfill new expectations. It's not just a museum, it will also be the possibility of being very responsive in terms of training, education, discovering tastings. There will be modules constantly every day that will be offered to transiting tourists. It's also a living place for the wine population, the wine region. And people here should be able to take advantage of these 3 sites, especially in Beaune, so that we can really discover very deeply what is the essence and the DNA of our region. So in a few words, so we also want to present ourselves as Bourguignon people with some humility, we are trying to speak and tell the story of Burgundy and be able to show it with its best aspects while remaining open to the questions that are put to us. This will be tackled especially in Beaune, where we have major topics of concern, such as the impact of global warming and also the wood disease of vines, the use of organic wine. So we will also delve into these questions, and we will be very open onto today's concerns. So in a nutshell, this is our project. We will meet now in a year's time for the official opening, but before that, we have open house events to visit the development of that concept and its building. It is also very important. So, any questions for this beautiful Bourguignon project? Everyone knows everything. Okay, let's meet in a year's time. What about patronage? Yeah, philanthropy, yes. The budget, the overall budget of it's 22 million. We're not slipping out of control on this budget with these three facilities or sites. This is widely financed by local authorities, by the wine growers, the merchants, and through the patronage or philanthropic support which was put in place about a year ago. We have a committee that collects the funds with some tax-free elements. We are trying to have about 5.5 million altogether, and tonight we are at 3.7 million out of the 5.5 we're aiming at. We will be more in the face with the general public, with all our different business lines, etc. But also, we will be in contact with foreigners. We already did an event in the United States. We are considering also something in China, a second one in the US. And we will try to bring together the 2 million that we are lacking to take forward this beautiful project. Thank you to all of you. Any questions about the Cité? There's a question on the chat. Can we develop the concept of the so-called wine school? Well, the wine school will be hosted and married to the Cité in Beaune. Basically, not only want to be into some kind of museum, but we want also to train, provide education, and be very responsive. We try to stick to the audience, to the public, to the professionals, to the amateurs, to the wine lovers, to their expectations. So to go beyond the traditional schools and be able to fulfill requests with modules that will be lasting, or workshops that will be lasting sometimes over 1 hour. Oliver, over to you.
Excusez-moi, juste pour être sûr de bien cerner, voilà Olivier Leroy.
Olivier Leroy, in charge of la Cité des Vins et des Climats de Bourgogne. No, I think basically the concept will be developed in Dijon. It's the Dijon-based wine school, where there are 4 topics that will be developed in the city of Dijon, as François Labet, with 40-minute to 1-hour workshops, and in these workshops there's interaction between the concentrating on traditional tastings commented by a professional person and opening onto the world with an environment, a film that will be broadcast on 4 walls. So it's concentrating on something and being opened up. It will whet your appetite to really discover on the ground Burgundy. Thank you, Olivier. So a question for Laurent. Given the rising raw materials, the rising price of raw materials and the energy, are you asking for special help from the government or from those who who are claiming to be the next president? I know that our professional organizations nationally are in contact with the Department of Agriculture and the Department of Finances, and there are also a number of mechanisms that are being reviewed. I will not go into the complexity of things, especially the EGalim Act, which manages relationship between producers and large retailers, supermarkets, hypermarkets, and some costs are rising too much, so we will allow through this act for the food business, we will allow producers to go back to the large retailers and explain and warrant their rising costs. As regards Burgundy proper, it's a bit too early to call. Another question now. Waiting for the question. In the face of the future price rises, the Burgundy wines will they not be lagging behind? Where will be the margin of these intermediaries? What about them? Look, we know that there is a trend here which is gaining ground, has been existing for some time. For me, the answer I can provide is the one I made before. This width of offer, the depth of range in Burgundy. I'm convinced that everyone can find Burgundy wines that are at the cost they want. Look, we are a very small region with a global demand, so it's the supply and demand principle, and unfortunately sometimes there's an international or geopolitical context that is such that it increases that mechanisms that we know quite well. Any additional questions? No. Behind the screens, we are not receiving new questions, so I think we've given you a good taste of every subject. We thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, for having listened to us. At any rate, be aware that Mathilde, Cécile, who are your contact people, they can direct you to the people who can give you answers to your questions. Don't forget that this is the third day of the Grands Jours. Tomorrow in the Côte Chalonnaise there's a major event and another key event on Friday. But here, in two other places as well, between Meursault and Montagne de Corton, and my colleagues who are organizing this will be happy to show you the latest vintages with regard to these appellations. Thank you for listening. I'd like to thank Denis Thomas, who represented the Côte d'Or region. Thanks for his support, and I wish you to have a very good evening. And we'll be very happy to be with you tomorrow and the day after in the midst of vineyards. Thank you very much.